Well, welcome everyone to the continuation of Peace Talks. Yeah, this here we could actually, I don't know what else to show. Where's my sweet Glinda? Cassie's getting stuck in cords over there. Come on in so you can see us. Okay, well, I am Dr. Jeneve Brooks, and I'll be the facilitator today, and we are so excited that this is the season of nonviolence, and we're continuing. We've had a beautiful time looking at various aspects of nonviolence, and Rose is joining us, and we have Peter and Jan and Reverend Nisi online. Hi, Rose. Come on in.
Come on, sit.
So we're so excited to be together, and now Cassie's
That's
not on.
perfect. That's
Cassie,
perfect.
that's not good. Okay, other people are in the room.
Are we hardwired or are we on Wi-Fi? Because I'm getting a little bit of a delay.
Well, I just changed it from the internet to a hotspot, which worked better last week.
Okay, so we don't have a plug-in for a hardwire.
We
Okay.
do.
But last week it wasn't working as well.
Oh, so the hardwire wasn't working last week.
Right, wasn't
Okay,
working.
I'll let Debbie know.
Is there like a delay right now?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, well.
Well, when Jeneve, when you speak, you're kind of coming through instantaneously, maybe because we're closer.
It's doing better.
That doesn't make sense, Peter, but okay.
That was funny though.
We're in Houston, so therefore Nisi in Atlanta doesn't hear it.
That's right. That's right.
Yes, we love you, everybody. So we're going to get started.
Okay.
I think we're good.
All right. Well, thank you for being here. And I'm going to do an opening treatment. We know that there is one power in the universe, infinite intelligence, divine love that flows through us, in us, and all around us. And we are a part of this magnificent, all-encompassing, omnipresent love and power. We are each a unique expression of God's face. So we speak our word for this topic of forgiveness tonight. May each one of us here in our beloved community, here at the SEC Spiritual Enrichment Center of Dothan, but also online, may we learn more about how to forgive ourselves and others, to soothe our troubled hearts and minds. We are so grateful that we are part of this one power, this one love, deepening our understanding of this transformative healing power of forgiveness. We speak these words into the law, knowing that it is so. Thank you, God. And so it is.
So it is. Beautiful.
So, just to start off on this topic, I'm sorry, I'm a nerd, and so I did do a resource sheet. Because I've now talked on forgiveness, and I can email this to you later. I'm sorry, but I'll tell you what they are. But I had given a talk at Spiritual Enrichment Center the end of December on forgiveness, and then recently just gave one at Unity at Fort Walton Beach. And it's just, you know, what I've learned before, I just feel like I need to keep on diving into. And, you know, for example, the things that I had learned before and kind of explored, it started off with 28 days of forgiveness that the Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta did in partnership with the forgiveness author and expert, Michelle Wadley. And they did that in November to December. Every day you got a phone call, 2 to 3 minutes of a forgiveness reflection. And it was very meaningful. Some were better than others, but some were just really powerful. And in fact, I think I was in the car with you a couple times when I would get the, it's like, oh, it's 9 a.m. forgiveness time. But the cool thing is about it, Michelle did develop an ebook that still is available if you Google, or I have the link here on the resource sheet that you can still download the ebook if you're interested. And they also have most of the recordings, I think about 22 days of the 28 days. So you can listen to that. And like I say, I did find it helpful to start to excavate this whole thing about forgiveness. And when I say excavate, I will say, of all the things I've ever taught or talked about, or, and when I say taught, I need forgiveness. I need to learn how to do forgiveness. So it's really the blind leading the blind when I've given talks on it. But I will say it was the freakiest situation to be talking and to look out at the congregation or the community, and people were so deep in their own thoughts. And so I wasn't getting the feedback that I usually get. Like, people were just like, I was like, what are they, comatose? Like, because people just went deep, because it's very provocative. It's a weighty, provocative topic that everyone kind of goes into their own story about. So anyway, going through this process, also when I talked about it before, I had also accessed, because I am a sociologist by training, and so academia is kind of academic research, and so I wanted to find something that wasn't necessarily as spiritually based as more kind of research based. And this professor, Dr. Robert Enright, wrote a book. He's a pioneer in forgiveness research. And he wrote a book called Forgiveness is a Choice, a step-by-step process for resolving anger and restoring hope. And in that book, he had originally worked with female incest victims and had tried to go through like months, almost, I think, a year and a half protocol with them, journaling exercises, all sorts of things to deepen their exploration. And he did show over the course of treatment that their anxiety and their depression levels had decreased. And so I was really interested in that. I did some of his exercises, although I haven't worked through the whole book. But it was definitely a great book. And it's also put out by the American Psychological Association. And then the third thing that I was accessing that really hit me was Eckhart Tolle's, it's on YouTube, it's a video, How Can We Really Forgive? And that was posted about a year ago. And I will say that Eckhart, sometimes I don't always vibe with him, and sometimes his laugh or whatever, I'm like, oh, please stop. But this was such a beautiful, when I listened to it, I just started crying, because he talks about how there's a space in all of us that is beyond being injured. There's a spaciousness, a divinity in each and every person that, is beyond being harmed. And he also said, when you are deeply hurt by something or someone, to remember that person did the thing from a state of unconsciousness, and it was like they weren't even there. And he talks about growing up that he basically grew up with a very abusive father. And I don't know if the father was also an alcoholic. I mean, but he said that, he was just such a sensitive child, and then just having this father like rage at the family, they were walking on eggshells. He was particularly abusive to the mother. And he said he just hated his father, to the point where he almost had, like dreams of murdering his father, like when he was a little boy. I mean, like he told some pretty wild stories. And then he said in his process of enlightenment, at some point, he just all of a sudden it hit him that his dad was not even there, when a lot of that, he was just not capable of being there, or really, he was in a state of unconsciousness. And he said he finally was able to just release it and be in a state of forgiveness towards his father. And so anyway, that was very powerful. And I love that video, and I've since have shared that with a lot of people, because when I talk to people, I mean, a lot of people, even outside of just talking about it at Spiritual Enrichment Center, I mean, just people are dealing with forgiveness issues, and sometimes it leads to physical pain, it leads to all sorts of emotional pain. So I've ended up sharing this video with a lot of friends just outside of the immediate spiritual circles. So this past Sunday, and I'm getting ready to give this talk too, but I gave the talk at Fort Walton Unity. And before I give the forgiveness talk, I went into their bookstore, and they had a woman that was very skilled in salesmanship. And so she got me to buy 3 books like that. I was like, oh my gosh, I got to get out of here. But she was talking, because, we were thinking about prosperity, just how we need prosperity in our own lives, but also prosperity for the Spiritual Enrichment Centers, prosperity for Fort Walton, and all these, just thinking about increasing abundance. And she's like, oh, you got to get Edwin Gaines, the 4 spiritual laws of prosperity. And so I was like, oh, well, let me look at the table of contents. I opened the table of contents, and one of the key laws is forgiveness. And so I was just like, oh my gosh. And then 2 chapters on forgiveness. So, so that started the deeper dive, for tonight. And I do want to kind of start with talking about that. Like I said, she has a lot of different tips on forgiveness, some of which didn't entirely resonate with me. I bought the book on Sunday, so I haven't finished it, but I went through the tithing part, and then I went into the forgiveness part. But one thing that really I thought was interesting was her notion that we need to reframe our stories when we need to forgive something that was very deep. Because part of the issue with not being able to forgive is holding on to the old story, and also getting into the victim role, like really loving the victim role, that like you were victimized, and that's your story. And so I just want to read you a section where she talks about reframing, and see what you guys think about it. And then I would like us to think about doing an exercise. So this is from page 127 of the 4 spiritual laws of prosperity, Edwin Gaines. Forgiveness I'm talking about in this chapter can be difficult to swallow when you think about the terrible things that people do to each other. For example, you might ask, what about the sexual abuse of a child? How can a person be asked to forgive something as terrible as that? And it is true that people do enormously dreadful things to other people. I myself was a victim of childhood sexual abuse, so I know full well the devastation that kind of betrayal can cause in a person's life. From the time I was 4 months old until I was 4 years old, I was sexually abused so badly that it almost killed me. Let's be honest, if someone hurts you or betrays you in a terrible way, it's often difficult to forgive that person. In fact, it's probably the most difficult thing that you can do. especially if you've been treated cruelly, you were lied to, you were stolen from, you were abandoned, you were molested, you were raped, you were cheated on, you were battered, you were betrayed. I'm sure you see where I'm going with this. It's so easy to blame the other person and so easy to take on the role of the injured innocent. In regard to my own experience with sexual abuse, I had particularly difficult time dealing with the effect it had on my self-esteem, and for many years, I was in the victim role. I will be eternally grateful for a teacher who one day abruptly called me and said, as once again I began my tale of woe, he said, listen, this victim stuff has gone far enough, and it's a drag, and it's boring me to tears. I was shocked. He had not given me the poor baby response that he had usually given me and that I had come to expect. As I gasped, he continued, in order to heal this childhood trauma, what you've got to do is create a new story about it. He paused and he gave it some thought. Okay, here's your new story. Try this one on and see if it works for you. You came onto this planet to be a woman of power. Your soul chose this as an initiation in the misuse of power at a very young age. During this initiation, you learned what it felt like when power was misused, and it is horrible. Therefore, it is now safe for you to be a woman of power in the world because you know now that you would never misuse your power. And in this process, you have gained the most valuable of all spiritual gifts, the understanding heart. My world reeled from this and cracked open a bit. It didn't happen overnight, but little by little, one day at a time, I began to embrace a wonderful new story, a saga that completely reordered my personal history. It made me feel powerful rather than helpless.
Wow.
So, one thing with forgiveness materials, I also, I don't want to come across like this is the way or this, should resonate with you because it resonated with me, because I think a lot of things, either hit or they don't. But I did kind of like this. I don't know. What do you guys think? How do you think about this reframing the story?
That's very powerful,
Mhm.
because the more we go over an old story, the more we believe it and the more it's entrenched
Yeah.
in our subconscious and our attitudes.
Mhm. Yeah. Rose, what do you think?
Um, well, first of all, I would never treat a sexual trauma victim. I would never say to a sexual trauma victim
Mhm.
what the teacher said.
Yeah,
As powerful as a statement as that may have been.
right.
I also think that forgiveness and denial can often get confused.
Mm, mhm.
I have sexual trauma victims, that are now 40 years old, to say to me, I've forgiven him. I've forgiven all that,
Mhm.
meaning I got over it. But you're sitting in my office and you've got a million problems.
Right.
And, it really didn't go in. You painted over it. You painted
Right.
the black fence white.
Right.
I think that we have to go deep into the psyche and allow a person to pour all that poison out. I call it sticking a needle in the pus pocket of the
Mhm.
heart,
Mm.
and allowing that poison to drain.
Right.
And then we can rewrite the story. And in my training at Masters and Johnson in New Orleans, there is tons of posters where do all the affirmations
Mhm.
after the poisonous release, you
Right.
know, and then that's where the true forgiveness comes in, and that's where we can be really freed.
Mhm.
But if we get too quick to forgive,
Mhm.
or if we're pressuring somebody to forgive before they're ready to forgive, that's about our discomfort.
Mm.
You know,
Mhm.
we've got to be careful about that.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
when I was going to a Harvest Church, and I'll shut up in just a minute because I want to hear
No, I
what you
mean,
got to say.
yeah.
But when I was going to Harvest Church, I mean, one of the reasons I left is because I actually had a client who was attending the church also, and she would always sit up in the balcony, but she was in one of the small groups, and they just were, she had been sexually abused for many years as a kindergartner, pre-kindergartner, and on up until right at adolescence. But anyway, by her grandfather. And but they were insistent that she had to forgive him, had to forgive him. And so she would ask me, how do I forgive him? She was real stuck there. And of course, my response, you know, as a therapeutic response is, you don't have to forgive until you're ready to forgive.
Right.
You know, when you're ready, the answers will begin to come. But anyway, she started telling me that she would sit up in the balcony and think about jumping over the balcony rail in an effort to kill herself.
Mm.
You know, all of this pressure to forgive
Mm.
was actually making the circumstances
Worse.
so much worse. She sent me a text message about 3 or 4 years ago, and she said, I have forgiven my perpetrator. You know,
Mm.
but I think that we do have to change the story. I think
Mhm.
that we do have to build in the affirmations, and I think that there is a way to do that. I wouldn't say what
Mhm.
that teacher said
Right.
to anybody who had that kind of wounding.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah. I mean, I definitely thought it was a little bit shocking.
Mhm.
And I thank you for saying that as a therapist, to bring that, I guess, I mean, as a friend, I mean, as a helping professional, you're also talking like, I would never say that to a client. Sometimes as a friend, you're given a lot of, your friends will confide in you and you see them kind of going over
Mm-hmm.
the same hurts. What are you supposed to, because sometimes you do want to say, can you, not, maybe not something is this serious, because hopefully with sexual abuse, you'd be like, go to your therapist, please. Incest, whatever, like all the things. But sometimes when you're just trying to help and be a friend, what do you all think is appropriate to say to someone? Because I think the flipping the script, I mean, it did resonate for me, but not maybe with something this serious. And like you say, like you have to go through a therapeutic process. But
Mm-hmm.
if you're trying to like kind of help a friend get out of a loop or get yourself out of a loop.
Right, right. Well, I don't think that we can convince somebody to forgive before they're ready. They can pretend to
Right.
forgive in an effort to appease us, but
Mhm.
they ain't gonna forgive until
Mhm.
they're ready, you know?
Mhm.
And that does come with time and, whatever they need. And I think, Jeneve, that it's just that we just, like in grief, we just sit with them. We have patience,
Mhm.
it requires us to have patience, and we have to be careful not to want to get in a hurry. Y'all hurry up and forgive.
Mhm.
So I won't feel so uncomfortable
Mhm.
because I'm uncomfortable with your unforgiveness.
Right.
So you know, we have to sort, we
Right.
have to sort that out. What's your stuff and what's mine.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
you know, I think that, but I think all of this is wonderful
Mhm.
material, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and it actually helped me with my mother. I told Glenda I've had a resentment about my mother for all of my adult life, and when you did your talk, I realized my mother, I don't know how I missed this, but my mother was just unconscious.
Mm.
She was just unconscious and made, you know, some critical mistakes. But anyway,
Mm-hmm.
so that's my take on it all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it brings to mind though, like sometimes you feel like you can't always be patient with yourself or with other people and trying to be forgiving. You know, because I know right now in my personal life, and I don't know if any, you know, Cassie, if you want to speak or out there and um online, on Zoom, because sometimes I just feel like, hurry up already, you know, for myself too. But then
Mhm.
sometimes I feel like I'm losing patience with friends or I'm losing patience with other people because I want them to get to the other side of something. How are you, because you don't want to say the wrong thing.
Mhm.
You don't want to be insensitive.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a very delicate balance, I think, because we want to help them to wake up to what they're doing, but yet we want to give them time to complete
And
the work
space.
that they need
The
to do
space,
it.
yeah.
So information like you're giving us, I think, is really helpful.
Right.
If we're ready to take it in, that, oh, I'm doing that to myself. I'm continuing in this myself.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe if we can give them facts and things, they can have the realization. That's
Mhm.
always the most important way to happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Nisi, you've been quiet. You,
Did Cassie want to say something or no?
No, I'm just listening.
Okay. I'm kind of with a lot of ideas came up, but I'm like Rose. I wouldn't have said that, and I would. You do sit with it like it's grief, which is what I know because there's nothing anybody can say, I think, to console someone when they're going through their own pain, because you're not going through it. They are. And timing is on God. It's always been on God. And there's a movie that I watched that made me think about all of the stories called The Shack.
Yes.
And that gentleman had to forgive himself because when he was a little boy, his father was abusing his mother. And he actually went to the church based on a neighborhood lady that told him, go talk to God. And the father almost beat the crap out of him for going to God and shaming him in his community because his father was a deacon. And, you know, now the father looks bad, but he was a closet drinker and a wife beater. So, it took him a long time. He had his own family and everything. So timing is on the individual. I think we at SEC just hold the space for forgiveness, for love, for all the attributes that we do. We just hold the space for it. And hopefully whoever comes will get exactly what they need and it will help them get through it because we all need something different. It's not a one size fit all at all.
yeah, yeah. Jackie or Peter and Jan, do you have anything?
Well, I'll chime in about so I guess we were just talking about forgiveness, about forgiving another person. What about maybe, well, I was here thinking I'm kind of waiting to be forgiven myself, but I guess like everybody else is saying, it's going to probably come at the person's own terms then,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yes, yeah, I went right into talking about forgiving someone else, or, you know, a situation that's hurt you where you are the victim, but there's also you know, the whole side of like forgiving ourselves for our misdeeds, our ways that things we've said, even unconscious things we've done that ended up hurting other people. I did
I
want to
guess
share. Yeah, go ahead.
it's kind of more in line. It's like, and while I guess I kind of feel that, I did, I made the, kind of like the right choice and the right decision, but the other person just didn't like it at all, and it's like they never did really, do they realize like you know, is I guess it's odd because we were talking about like physical and verbal abuse and sexual assault and everything else, and it's kind of like, well, I guess in my circumstances, it was just kind of like an everyday function where you had to take and choose on something, but it wasn't the choice that the other party was involved. And it's like they didn't like that answer. And then it's like, well, all right, I'm not doing anything more with that person at all. So it's kind of like, I guess I'm not really playing the victim, but I guess I feel that what the decision that that we made was kind of the best at the time, but like that other person didn't like it, and it's like we're just kind of waiting for that other person to forgive us, to respect the decision that we made, even though it wasn't in favor of the other person. I don't know if that makes any
Mm.
sense at all, but
Or
Yeah,
if
it does.
I may step in here,
Mhm.
I would not know how to tell someone how to forgive, how to get over the victimhood mentality and just forgive and go on. I would not know how to do that. But for me personally, um, you know, I can't say I've forgiven everything that I felt, some other person has done, but if I can understand where they're coming from, if I can say to myself, well, this person, uh, they just didn't know what they were doing at the time. And I could say that for myself too. If I had known better, maybe I wouldn't have done this or that or said this or that. So it's like I don't know really how to express myself. If I just can forgive myself because I didn't realize I would hurt somebody else or that it would cause them harm. So if
Mhm.
I can do that with myself, I should be able to do that with someone else, that even though it hurt me, their actions hurt me, they didn't know what to do either. It's like
Mhm.
you have to learn as you go along in life that, okay, I should have known better. I didn't. And kind of like what Peter said, if you had known better, maybe you would have done better, but you didn't. So you kind of are able to forgive yourself for not knowing what to do. And therefore you could forgive. Well, I'd have to say, some of the people you're talking about, it's extreme. And I'm fortunate that I haven't experienced that. But even a little thing, just something that somebody says to you and it gets on your nerves, you just think,
Mhm.
oh, well, I'm, you just forgive that. They just don't know what they're saying. They don't know what they're doing. Um, is that clear or am I really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
you can kind of understand where somebody was coming from. Maybe they came from a bad situation, whether it was their family or spouse or ex-spouse or whatever. That if you can say to yourself, here's an example, I guess, like in the Bible, where Jesus says, "Forgive them, Father, they know not what they're doing." And that's
Yeah,
all.
but he was being crucified at the time, so that was a very high bar.
Well,
But
yeah,
that,
yeah,
that, that-
okay, so that was pretty extreme.
But-
But I do use that in my own life. I'll just say to myself, I have to forgive them. They just don't know what they're doing.
but it's like what we talked about, the unconsciousness of the mind. Then it's like you're kind of not realizing it then.
Yeah, you may not realize that you have hurt someone else,
Yeah.
and that other person, well, in extreme circumstances, yes, they should know better. But let's just say something little. You say something and it hurts someone else's feelings, or you do something and you don't really realize that you're going to affect those people as you did. So if somehow in your mind you can reason, I didn't know, I'm sorry that I hurt that person, but I didn't, like as Rose was saying, someone was unconscious. Maybe you weren't conscious of what you were doing, that you were hurting someone else and you didn't realize it. And you just have to forgive yourself and say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what I did or what I said because I hurt that other person. And if I had to go back in time, I wouldn't do it again. I'm sorry for
Right.
what I said. And
Yeah.
And the same thing, we have to be forgiving for other people. Maybe they hurt your feelings, or you feel like they haven't, I don't know, shown you their best side, I guess. And so you just have to say, they didn't know what they were doing.
Mhm.
Or maybe they had been in some situation, like I said, in their their family, and I can't help it. It's like, maybe they are rude or disrespectful because that's what the way they were brought up. And
Mhm.
I don't
Yeah,
know. This is a hard one, Jeneve. You got a hard subject here.
I do
Forgiveness.
have a hard subject. Nisi, it seems like you want to say something.
Yeah, I'm looking at Mother Teresa's recipe for peace. We opened up our attributes with peace, and the first line in her recipe for peace is people are often unreasonable, illogical, and self-centered. Forgive them anyway. So if we become unreasonable ourselves or illogical or self-centered ourselves, there's I think there's a constant forgiveness because the story that I mentioned with the shack, the boy poisoned his father at 8 or 9 because he couldn't stop him from beating his mother. So come full circle, his daughter get kidnapped and killed, his youngest one. So he thought he was being punished for killing his father that young. So what I'm trying to bring into this conversation is that you don't know what you're doing when you're a kid. You're not aware. All you want is the pain to stop. You've got this person that's supposed to be taking care of you, but they weren't taken care of. So of course they don't know how to take care of you. But as a kid, you don't know that. These are your parents. These are your guardians. These are your whoever. So now you've been indoctrinated as a kid that that's how you act. So now you don't know what to do. So I think we have, like I said before, we just have to hold the space for forgiveness. We have to hold the space for kindness, have to hold the space for success, and then they walk into it because that's what this place held for me. I was going through domestic violence when I found this teaching. Somebody was hitting me. The closest person to me was hitting me. I was an
Mhm.
intelligent woman working for IBM, 3 kids, one off to college, but this man was still hitting me.
Mhm.
What staged me was knowing that I didn't deserve it.
Mhm.
If I thought I deserved it, I probably would just stayed in it. But I knew I didn't deserve it. I don't know where it came from. I don't know whether I was old enough to know, whatever, or had enough. But it was that line in this recipe for peace that it was illogical, it was unreasonable, and it was self-centered. So there's nothing I can do with that. I didn't forgive it immediately, but this teaching helped me to forgive it. So we've got to stay around people that help us hear things. Nobody told me what to do. I just kept plugging into the center. I kept taking classes. I kept writing in my journal. I kept going to work every day. I kept loving on my children. And eventually, that nonsense, that illogical, self centered, unreasonable activity stopped.
Mhm. What is the line again? People are what?
People are often unreasonable, illogical, and self centered. Forgive them anyway.
Anyway.
And
You know,
ourselves too.
yeah, I was gonna, add to that, that it seems like it comes down to grace. We have to accept grace, which to me means accept that I'm loved and understood and forgiven by the divine, even if I don't know how to do it myself. And that I can give grace to others by understanding that they are also loved and forgiven by the divine, regardless of what my understanding is. There's just a feeling of being in grace that helps me to get through things like that.
If
That's
you
beautiful.
haven't been through that, you don't know what that means. If somebody's getting hit, they're not thinking about grace in that minute. They're just not. If you're getting beat up by somebody verbally or physically, grace doesn't is not the first thing you think about.
No,
It's just not.
Yeah.
no.
But
It's a
in the
choice.
shack, what he came to realize was he had to forgive the person who murdered his child, you know. And so, that I think that's where grace comes in. If you're being molested or whatever, grace is not the first thing you think about, but it's the thing that's going to save us in the end. I mean, I love that book. What's so amazing about grace? I had thought about that in this discussion.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Who wrote that?
Oh, I can't remember right now. Jeneve,
What's so amazing?
what's so amazing about grace?
That's a cute name.
It is beautiful.
Mhm.
I did want to read uh, a reflection that Michelle Wadley, kind of what everyone's talking about, what Jan had also mentioned, that I am willing to recognize that there is a place of innocence in all beings.
Mhm,
It might live deep in the center of their being
mhm,
as it resides deep within me, but it is there all the same. I practice forgiveness, compassion, and empathy for all individuals, including myself. I release and free them from my judgments. I know if they could have done better, they would have. And I know that if I could have done better at the time, I would have. My forgiveness is my claim to freedom, self love, and a life of beauty, joy, and peace. Peace and grace are the results that live within me forever.
mhm.
And I think something that you said earlier about, I can't remember the phrase, but something about there's a place within us that hasn't been hurt.
Can't be hurt.
They can't be hurt. At one point, I was going through some healing about some childhood abuse that had happened to me, and I was talking to my practitioner, and I was just sobbing my heart out. And she said at that time, Glenda, there's a place in you that's never been hurt. It's never been touched. And I just, it hit me and I quit crying because I realized that there is a safe space within me that can't be touched. And that was helpful to me at the moment.
Mm,
Mhm. I think that,
Beautiful.
I think that is beautiful and helpful.
One thing that's come up diving deeper into this topic, and thank you guys for putting up with me, that it's so free flowing and kind of all over the map. But this whole notion of wanting to have forgiveness, wanting to have grace, but also wanting, if there can be, some type of justice, sometimes in certain situations, or some type of restorative justice, a way of moving towards right action, of reconciliation. I came across, because I was Googling a lot of stuff on forgiveness, and a lot of Christian you know, blogs and different people discussing. And this guy, who I guess is a minister, his name's Tim Keller, and he wrote a book called Forgive, Why Should I, and How Can I? And he did have this section on justice, saying it is our job to help people see their wrongdoing out of love for them, love for potential future victims, love for the human community, and love for God. The only way this is possible is if you also forgive as you are seeking justice. And I know I've talked to Nisi separately, and I know that Nisi's like, forgive, and it's not about justice, but this is something I battle with. Like, I want justice. I want to feel like if there can be justice. I mean, sometimes you just can't get it, like the person that did the wrong thing, they'll just never be held accountable. And that's the way the cookie crumbles right now.
But I do think what goes around comes around. I do. I don't know whether it comes around in this generation or the next, but I think when we stop those kind of, what do they say? Stop the violence or stop the curse. Sometimes, the father was abusive to the boy, so the boy got abused by his father. And when you look at the movie, it was a chain reaction. So somebody had to stop it. Somebody had to figure out, even though I've been hurt, I'm not going to keep hurting. And I think I'm that person. I've had generations of hurt before me, but I'm not going to pass this further on. So I'm more like a transition figure. And I see that as justice. I see that in Mandela. I see that in Martin Luther King. So they didn't pass on the violence, but they made they've been violated against, but they didn't do the same thing that happened to them to someone else. To me, that's a form of justice too.
I agree.
Um, if I might say something, Jeneve?
Yes.
Again, going back to the Bible.
And we
Can
can't
you
hear
get a
you.
little bit closer to the mic?
Oh, I'm sorry. Going back to the Bible, I can't remember where I read it, but it says, justice is mine, saith the Lord. And the way I kind of look at that is, we may not see justice if someone has wronged us, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't come to them, that spirit takes care of that. I don't have to worry about it.
Right.
Do you know?
That
I mean,
that natural law, what goes around comes around. If you do something, what you plant, you sow. What you reap, you sow. That's what you mean, Jan?
like if someone else, let's say someone else does you wrong, and you are so mad, you want to see them maybe even suffer or have to pay up for what they did. I don't have to see that happen. I don't have to feel that that person got a just reward. I just have to let it go and say, Spirit will take care of this. Karma will take care of this. God will take care of this. That's not my job. My job is to forgive, and then the justice will come. Does that make any sense?
Does that apply in our present?
What'd you
Rose,
say?
Rose is rocking in her seat over there. She's moving back and forth.
Present political climate, because I'm really wanting some justice.
No, and you know, I think we want it. We want justice. Yes,
We're human.
that is a natural human
Mhm.
You're
feeling
right. Yep.
that, yes, when
Think
someone
of God
has
as being
done
just,
wrong,
right?
pardon?
I'm sorry,
Pardon?
Jan, but I just interjected. You think of God's law as being based on justice too. So that's partly too. It's like there's a righteous element to wanting the justice.
This is that long arc of the universe that Martin Luther King Jr. told us about. It's the universe, the arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. It's real long.
It just bends towards it. It doesn't achieve it.
But Jeneve, you know, you brought up about justice. So are you saying that you want to see justice when someone has done you wrong or someone has done someone else wrong? And I think it's normal. I mean,
Mhm.
we're talking about, you know, you all mentioned some horrendous things there. And you just want to say, there's got to be a stop to this. It can't go on. And I haven't seen the movie or read the book that you all are talking about, but you can understand that child's frustration and uh that person wants justice
Mhm.
and he takes it
Mhm.
to his own hands, even though
Mhm.
he's a child. So
Mhm.
we do want justice. It just seems like the right thing.
Right.
But sometimes we may not see that justice. We may not see, and maybe that person has some kind of realization and actually feels guilty for their deeds. And, you know, ask for forgiveness, not from the person that they have wronged, but just like to the universe. I'm so sorry for what I've done, and I ask for forgiveness. But you may not see that change in that person because you may not be around that person. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Right.
You
Right.
brought Emmett Till's mother to mind when you said that, Jan. Because when I do see forgiveness, I actually see her face now, sometimes, literally, from what I've read. Because if anybody's seen her battered son that was on Jet, you can actually Google it if you want to. And somewhere in her praise for God, knowing there was a higher power, she knew to show that. That was her only son. And she was divinely guided. I don't know how she got through that. I don't, except through prayer and God and something bigger, because she had to forgive somewhere along the way to be able to be an activist for civil rights after something like that happened. So I have to look to people who may not have gotten the justice that they think they wanted, but still had the capacity to live beyond the hurt that they endured. And, you can see that with a lot of women. Jacqueline Kennedy was assassinated. Her husband was assassinated. Part of his brain was on her, and she had the wherewithal to keep that pink suit on for people to see what happened to her husband. She had to jump in some kind of forgiveness mode over justice. at that point, or acceptance. I don't know what they did, but that's who I look to myself. These people, if they can do it, I can do it. I don't know what they did, but if they can do it, I can do it. And what are y'all doing? Let me do that.
I just wanted to say with Emmett Till, by her choosing to have the open casket, that helped spur the civil rights movement too, you know, so in a way, it brought about larger justice, movement towards justice, outside of
Exactly,
just
yeah.
the individual.
And Jackie said, I want them to see what they've done.
Right.
Yes, she did. I want them to see what they've done.
Mhm.
So, and then our Jackie actually sent, I think when we were talking earlier, she sent the author of some book. We were considering who the author was, so that's in our chat as well. Because the more we read, I think one of the things that helped me so much that we're doing now and hopefully more of is these kind of fireside chats, if you will. If we get it up out of us, we're helping the world get it up out of them just in this room to have some forgiveness, because we're putting out the forgiveness vibration in the universe. Just in this room, we're having this ripple effect with the topic.
He wrote the book.
Philip
Philip Yancey.
Yancey.
Yes,
Okay.
Philip Yancey, that's
Yeah.
right.
Yancey,
Mhm,
okay.
yeah.
Well, I know that it's a little past 7, so should we go ahead and close out? I'm sorry that it was kind of scattered and it's such a deep topic.
There's a lot to cover.
I think
And I
we
mean, we're
covered
not
a
even
lot.
we're not
Yeah, I
even
think
scratching this.
so we
So
might
many
have to do
nuance.
this forgiveness, the sequel.
Yeah.
2.0. Yeah. So
We can
yeah,
still
we'll
go on for a couple more hours if you guys want. I may not, but
I
Okay,
don't
well,
think we have to. It's up to you. You know, if everybody's not ready to run off, you can give us maybe a little bit more nuggets and then we'll close it out, Jeneve, if you want. It's up to you.
well,
Well,
I would have to think, yeah, I think if the person is able to forgive, and I think this I don't, well, I'm not sure. I'll go if a person is able to forgive, then justice should be kind of like on the side, and that would be kind of like maybe like a little bonus or something, because you took the initiative to forgive, and then if something
little
happens, well,
frosting.
then, yeah.
I like that. Peter says, justice is the bonus. Sounds like a talk title.
And I'll go back, I know I put this to some other folks, and I know I mentioned this to Nisi, and I think, well, I'll see if she did. We'll see if she loves it again. But I take and tell folks, I says, I never got a letter in the mail to make me a judge, so
I do love that.
I just kind of just, I leave it to somebody else, and
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. I guess one last question to throw out. Things come up continually throughout our lives that, someone makes, I mean, even something as simple as like Jan, you were saying, like someone makes an annoying comment or a comment that maybe hurts you a little bit or just annoys you or more serious stuff comes up that you're like, oh, wasn't planning to deal with this. And now, someone's kind of really wronged me here. And do I pursue legal action? I mean, like, there's different things that happen that you're just kind of, throughout the course of our lives, and it doesn't stop. So forgiveness does have to be an ongoing practice. Um, I feel like I don't get there soon enough. Like I know I need to forgive, but I still want to really work through it. And I don't know how long to work through it, and I just want to get to the healing part. I just was interested in other people's experience with that. Like, how do they deal with the ongoing? How do they process? How do they move towards forgiveness?
I see the forgiveness process is very similar to the grief process, or maybe even the same. From denial, to anger, to bargaining, and then to a deep, deep sadness or repentance or, grief about, the harm that has been done, and on to a place of acceptance and forgiveness and peace and
Mhm,
grace.
mhm.
But
Uh,
that's a hard process.
How
to
can
go
you
through.
move through it? Can you move through it quicker? Can you kind of move?
Everybody wants to. We all want.
everybody wants to,
Marie,
we don't like to hurt.
Y'all keep on speed up. Me. I mean, and so-
Can we put it on a
so
treadmill?
forgiveness, forgive, I mean, that's just us beating up on ourselves or still holding on to it or whatever. And, I mean, it's a process. And I just need to hush. But anyway,
No, I agree with that, Rose. It is a process. And everybody keeps trying to speed it up, but we all heal from, say, surgery at different pace too. Some people get right up at 6 weeks, like the doctor says, and some people never recover fully from the same surgery. Some people die from that surgery. So, there's no one size fit all. I can't say enough. It's just not. And you've got to let it be, but let your end game be healing. I do want to heal. So you got to put yourself in the right positions to heal. You got to get up out of that bed. If they said walk a day and you're not walking, of course you're not going to heal. So you got to do the things that get you to healing too. And our center is a part of that emotional and spiritual healing, like the hospital is for physical
Right.
and other healing too.
If I might add, I was listening to NPR this afternoon, and there was a woman on there who she was talking about grief and what had happened. Her 12-year-old daughter was killed in an automobile accident. Along with her daughter was her daughter's best friend, and that best friend's mother, who was
Mm.
also a friend of hers. So three people whom she loved so much, and their lives are taken from them. And it was because this guy was going real fast and ran a red light and hit their car and
Mm.
killed them. And so she tells the story about how she was in such grief. And her husband as well. And it came to the point where they could confront or at least meet the man who drove the car, who was the cause of the death. And the woman chose not to meet him, and her husband chose to meet him. And they both did the right thing
Mm-hmm.
because she knew that she could not see his face because she would always see his face in her mind.
Mm.
But for her husband, he needed that face-to-face contact with this person who had killed his daughter.
Mm-hmm.
So they both were able to go through this healing process, but in different ways.
One
So,
size
like you
doesn't fit
said,
all.
there's, we're not all alike. We
Mm-mm.
don't all heal at the same time. And even the method of healing might be different from
Mm-hmm.
one person to another.
Mm-hmm.
So, Jeneve, no, I don't think there's the quick fix, but we would like to have it. We would love.
be gentle with ourselves
Mhm.
in the process of grief or in the process of forgiveness, to remember to be gentle with ourselves, and we're doing the best that we can do for today.
Mhm. Anybody else want to share? Since you won't give me any spiritual aerobics to get there quicker.
I liked spiritual aerobics. That's what you do to keep it going. You said, I think you said it perfectly. That was a great setup because it's the habit of forgiveness now, I'm gonna say. You make it a habit to forgive. So if that comes up in you again, because back to those women, I'm sure those visions popped up in their head throughout their lives. And I think they had to forgive those people for the rest of their lives, their natural lives.
That's
I
a good
think forgiveness is ongoing.
Mhm.
That's a good point that you made, that we have to get in the habit. So if those thoughts come in our mind, negative thoughts about something somebody did or said or whatever, uh, if we can remind ourselves to forgive in that particular moment when you have that thought.
Mhm,
I said I was going to forgive. I'm going to
mhm,
forgive that person. So,
mhm.
like you said, it's a habit that we have to cultivate, and we have to remember to do that.
Well, and I think too about another good point that came up tonight too is represent yourself as a different story,
Right.
because you make yourself make yourself the story of Cinderella or Prince Charming or whatever, because you can justify that in your own mind to boost your self-esteem.
Well, I never thought about it that way, Peter. So I guess Cinderella just said, I forgive my stepmother and my two stepsisters that treated me so badly, because I won out in the end.
He did.
Now you become
Mhm.
Cinderella.
One of my favorites. Sorry.
Cinderella, she never did carry on like this. Why do I?
I want to just quickly try to tell my story of when Jerry, my husband, died by suicide. I would often sit down in my favorite chair over here and I would go back. I would do it like moving men on the chessboard. If I had done this, and then his sister had done this, and this person
Mhm,
had, the psychiatrist had done this, and if, and
Mm.
I played chess with that situation
Mm.
for about 3 years. And I would sit down in that chair and go back into the rabbit hole. And one day I sat down in the chair ready to redo all my chess men. And I thought, Rose, you can do this if you want to, but the result's going to be the same.
Mm.
It's not going to change.
Mm.
I got up and scrubbed my floors or washed my dishes or whatever was next to do in my life, the one I was living, that I was still here to live. And I just would like to, in out of that came forgiveness. And, it evolves out of that.
mhm. Wow.
Powerful.
Powerful, yes. Wow.
Reverend Nisi, do you want to close this out?
I will. We've had a hearty talk and the
All of
universe will get to see this. We didn't shut down the cameras at all. So I look forward to others getting the benefit of what we've done, and we will have more peace talks on this subject. So let us breathe in and out the substance that's readily available for us. And we are all forgiven, each one of us, under the sound of my voice, each person that we touched, people that have gone on before us and that after. So we are here, the bearers of light, of love, of peace, knowing that as we make it a habit of loving ourselves and loving one another, that's where forgiveness comes from. So we thank the facilitator, all the participants, and we embody peace during the season of nonviolence, and we make sure that we are not violent against ourselves, which will prevent violence against others. We give thanks for this opportunity to live life to the fullest every moment that we're here, and so it is.
Oh, it is.
It
Thank
is.
you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. This was great. Bye.
I wish I had the camera going. I'll have to try next week. You did a great job, Jeneve. Thank you. And
Thank
Cassie.
you. Thank you all.
Yep. Have a good evening.
Bye.